Elias did not mean to listen. He was only trying to sleep. The hallway outside his rented chamber was older than any city he had ever seen. Stone arches rose like ribs above him, and the air smelled of rain and cold iron. He'd been warned that. The palace was full of strange acoustics. That sound traveled the way light did in water, bending, hiding, returning. Still, when the first note slipped through the wall, it did not feel like sound at all. It felt like a hand reaching into his chest and turning his heart slightly to the left. He sat up in the narrow bed, breath caught, listening. The song was soft, but it carried weight. Not a tavern melody, not a priest's chant, not the careless humming of servants. It was a secret song. The kind people sing only when they believe nobody in the world can hear them. It trembled with restraint, like someone crying without allowing a single tear to fall. Elias pressed his palm to the stone. The wall was cold, almost wet, as if the castle itself were alive and sweating. The melody rose again, and then a voice, a woman's voice. Clear and pale, like moonlight, not in his language but in something older, something that still made sense to his bones. He should have turned away. He should have covered his ears. He should have remembered the rules he had been given when he arrived. Never wander without escort, never speak to unseen voices, never touch the marked mirrors, never under any circumstance let the queen notice you. But he listened anyway, because the voice carried pain in it, and pain did not need translation. The song changed. A second layer joined it, like harmonies forming themselves out of air. The stones under his feet began to vibrate, so faintly he could have imagined it. And then the final note fell into silence, not fading, not drifting away. Cut off like a thread snapped tight. Elias stayed frozen. His mouth was dry, his throat tight. He whispered without meaning to. "I am sorry," the air answered. Not with a voice, but with a presence. As if the darkness on the other side of the wall had turned its face toward him. As if the one who had been singing had stopped not because she chose to, but because she had heard him breathing. Because she had heard him listening. Elias backed away from the wall. His heel touched the edge of the polished tile, and the faint scrape echoed too loudly. A soft metallic chime sounded somewhere in the corridor. Far away, then closer, then right outside his door. 3 slow knocks, not the knock of a guard, not the knock of a servant, a knock that felt like a question that could also become a sentence. Elias did not move. He did not answer. He stood in the dimness as another sound joined the air, a whispering flutter, like paper turning pages on its own. Glowing shapes seeped under the crack of the door and slid across the floor, white runes, bright as frost, drifting as if weightless. They hovered in front of him, and for a brief, impossible moment, he understood them without reading. Listening is a crime here. Hearing is a throne. Who are you? Elias swallowed. He should have lied. He should have pretended he was asleep. He should have prayed the runes would fade. Instead he spoke into the empty room. Voice shaking, "My name is Elias Hart. I did not know anyone was there. I heard a song, and it sounded like someone needed help." The air tightened. The runes spun once faster, like startled birds. Then they moved, drifting toward the far side of the chamber where his small desk stood. They hovered above the old brass lamp and then slipped away, out through the wall again, as if the wall had become water, and the symbols were swimming through it. Elias stood alone again. But the feeling of being watched did not leave. It pressed at the back of his neck. Gentle and terrible. He did not sleep after that. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the stone, waiting for another note, waiting for another knock, waiting for consequences. When morning came, pale light filtered through the tall arched windows of the corridor outside. Elias stepped into the hallway and felt the castle watching him from every carved corner. The palace was quiet in that early hour, too quiet. Even his footsteps sounded like they were being measured and judged. He tried to walk away from his chamber as if nothing had happened. He tried to remember why he was here. He was only a translator, a minor scholar pulled from a university that nobody in this world cared about. He had been hired because the Queen's court had opened a rare diplomatic channel with human nations. Because the Queen's people spoke in layered tongues that shifted meaning with tone and breath. Because humans were clumsy and loud, and they needed someone patient enough to listen. He rounded a corner and stopped. A circular mirror was set into the left wall, ornate and dark, framed by an archway etched with geometric designs. He had been told to avoid all mirrors with runes. But this one was not hidden. It was placed like an invitation, like a trap. The polished surface did not reflect his face the way it should have. It reflected a different hallway, colder, brighter, and alive with blue light. And in that reflection stood her, a pale blue-skinned woman with long platinum hair, straight as silk, falling over her shoulders. A silver crown rested on her head, delicate, sharp, too beautiful to be safe. Her eyes were wide, her expression caught between surprise and distress. Her hands were clasped at her chest as if she were holding her own heart in place. She stared directly at Elias as if the mirror were not glass, but open air. Elias could not breathe. He knew without being told who she was, not a servant, not a noble, not a court singer, the Queen herself. His knees threatened to give out. His mind flooded with warnings and stories, how her gaze could unravel secrets, how her voice could compel truth, how her people called her the listener queen, because she could hear what others only guessed, how she had ended wars by catching a lie in the pause between two words. The Queen's lips parted slightly, and the sound that came was not the song. It was a whisper that slid into his head more than into his ears. "You heard me." Her voice carried no anger, only disbelief, and something that trembled beneath it, a fear that she tried to hide. Elias forced himself to bow, but his movement was clumsy, too human, too fast. "Your Majesty, I did not mean to intrude. I thought it was a dream at first." Her eyes flicked toward the corridor around him, as if she could see through stone. Then back to him, sharper now. "There are no dreams in these walls, only echoes, only secrets, only what the palace chooses to keep." Between the man and the arched windows to his right, glowing letters drifted into the air, white runes, bright and clean, hovering like snow that refused to fall, EPR, and others that twisted into meaning as Elias tried to focus. The Queen lifted one hand slowly, as if calming a frightened animal. "Do not look away. If you look away, I will assume guilt." Elias held her gaze. His throat burned. He wanted to ask why she had been singing in secret, but he knew curiosity could be fatal here. Still, the question rose anyway. "Are you in danger?" The Queen's expression tightened. She did not answer immediately. In the pause, Elias felt the palace around him lean closer, listening. Then she said softly, "I am the danger to myself, and that is why they keep me inside the song." Elias did not understand, but the sadness in her voice made him feel as if he did. He took a careful step toward the mirror, stopping before his own reflection could disappear entirely. "Your Majesty, I do not want to offend you, but I heard pain in your voice. That is why I listened. That is why I answered." The Queen's hands unclasped, then clasped again, a small, human gesture inside an unhuman body. "You were not supposed to be able to hear it. Only my court can hear the Queen's private notes. Only the vault singers, only the oath-bound. Yet you heard it through the wall like it was spoken in your ear." Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in searching. "Tell me truth, Elias Hart. What are you?" Elias felt his stomach drop. He had no clever title, no hidden power, no bloodline to save him. He was only a man who had listened when he should not. "I am nobody," he said, "a scholar, a translator, a human with too much empathy and not enough sense." The Queen's gaze softened for a heartbeat. "Nobody is safe here," she whispered, "and empathy is the first thing they weaponize." A distant bell rang once, deep and low. The Queen flinched as if it struck her skin. Her eyes darted upward, towards something Elias could not see. "They are coming," she said, voice urgent now. "The chamberlains, the listeners, the ones who guard my silence, if they see you here, at this mirror, They will tear your name out of the registry and pretend you never existed. Elias's hands went cold. What should I do? The queen stared at him. Like a decision was burning behind her eyes. Then she spoke in a tone that felt like stepping onto a bridge in a storm. Listen again. Elias swallowed. The last time he listened, her song had turned into runes and knocks and fear. Now she was asking him to do it on purpose. He nodded. Barely. I will. The queen leaned closer to the mirror, close enough that her breath fogged nothing. Because the glass was not glass. I will sing one line, she said. If you hear the hidden notes beneath it, it means you are not only hearing, it means you are being chosen. Elias wanted to say he did not want to be chosen by anything in this palace, but the queen's expression was not commanding. It was pleading, and that broke something in him. She inhaled, then sang, a single line, gentle as a lullaby. The sound spilled into the corridor, soft, almost tender. It should have been harmless, but beneath it, Elias heard another melody, darker, faster, like footsteps running underwater. He heard a second voice woven into hers, a voice that was not hers. A voice that did not belong to a person at all. It belonged to the palace. Elias's eyes widened. Your song is not alone, he whispered. Something is singing with you. The queen's face tightened with grief, and for the first time she looked younger. And her crown, yes, she said. They made the palace a choir. They bound my voice into its stone, so every time I sing, it listens back. And every time it listens, it reports. Elias felt sick. That is why you stopped last night. Because you heard me listening. And you realized the palace heard me too. The queen nodded, slow and pained. You understand too quickly. That is dangerous. Footsteps echoed in the distance, measured and precise. More than one person. Elias turned his head toward the sound, then back to the queen, panic rising. What do they want from you? The queen's voice became very quiet. They want me to be perfect. They want me to be a symbol. They want me to marry a man I have never met, to bind an alliance with an empire that will swallow mine whole. And they want my gift, the listening, to be used only for their purposes, not mine. Elias felt heat rise behind his eyes. Anger and helplessness mixed together. That is a prison. The queen's eyes glimmered. It is worse than a prison, because everyone calls it duty. And duty is a prettier word for chains. The footsteps grew closer. The queen's expression sharpened into urgency. Elias' heart, she said. If you truly heard the hidden notes, you can hear what is behind walls. You can hear what they whisper when they think no one is listening. That means you can hear the truth of this palace. And if you can hear it, you can survive it. Elias's mouth went dry. Survive it how? The queen lifted her hand and pointed toward the right side of the hallway, where tall windows poured bright, diffused light onto polished tiles. Walk to the third window, she said. Count the panes. Touch the fifth stone beneath the ledge. Do it now. Elias did not question. He moved fast, his footsteps loud in the hush. He reached the third window, counted the panes with shaking eyes, placed his fingers on the fifth stone beneath the ledge. The stone was warmer than the others. It clicked softly under his touch. A thin seam opened in the wall beside the window, just wide enough for a man to slip through. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of underground water. Elias turned back. The queen was still in the mirror, watching him with desperate intensity. Go, she mouthed silently. Before they see you. Elias hesitated. He did not want to abandon her. Not after hearing what was happening. He stepped back toward the mirror, voice cracking. Your Majesty, I cannot just leave you. The queen's eyes widened, fierce. You cannot save me by dying in the hallway, she said. You save me by living long enough to carry my song outside this palace. You save me by being the one person who heard me as a person, not a crown. The footsteps were near now, close enough that Elias could hear the exact rhythm. 4 guards, 1 leader, 2 trailing listeners. He heard the jingle of keys, the soft scrape of metal against stone. Elias forced himself toward the opening in the wall. He slipped inside, and the seam closed behind him with a whisper, leaving darkness. For a moment he stood in blackness so complete he could not tell if his eyes were open. Then the tunnel breathed. And the runes returned, not floating this time, but etched faintly into the air like glowing dust. Guiding him forward, Elias moved carefully, one hand on the wall. His heart hammered. He listened, not just with ears, but with everything. The tunnel had its own music, a low hum like distant singing, and beneath that hum, he heard voices above, muffled by stone. The leader's voice, cold and amused. The human is restless, it always happens. They come here thinking language is power. Another voice answered, sharper. The queen sang last night. We felt it through the walls. Someone heard. Someone answered, silence. Then the leader again, find the mirror. If he touched the mirror, remove him. If he spoke to her, remove him slowly. Elias felt his blood go icy. His stomach twisted. They were not merely suspicious. They were sure. The palace had reported him. He stumbled forward faster. Fighting panic, the tunnel narrowed, then widened into a small chamber lit by a single shaft of pale light from a crack above. In the center was a shallow pool, clear water reflecting the stone ceiling like a dark eye. And beside the pool stood a door that did not look like a door. It looked like an outline carved into rock, filled with thin shimmering air, like heat. Rising from summer ground, Elias stopped. His breath came in short bursts. He knew, without explanation, that this was another threshold. Another place where the palace decided who belonged and who did not. A whisper rose behind him, not footsteps. Not a guard, a whisper like silk pulled tight. Elias, he turned. The queen stood there, not in flesh, but as a reflection in the surface of the pool, her pale blue face looking up at him from the water. Her eyes wide, urgent, alive. You are still with me, she said. The words did not echo, they settled into his mind like warm ash. Elias fell to his knees beside the pool. Your Majesty, how are you here? The queen's reflection trembled. I am not here, not fully. I cannot leave the palace, but I can reach into its hidden water paths. I can ride the echoes of my own song. It is the only freedom they have not sealed. Elias's voice broke. They are going to kill me. The queen's expression tightened, grief and anger burning together. No, she said, they are going to erase you. And there is a difference. Death is honest. Erasure is cruelty that pretends it never happened. Elias stared into her eyes. What do you want me to do? The queen's hands rose in the water, clasping at her chest the way she had in the mirror. I want you to hear everything, she said. I want you to remember it, because the palace has stolen my voice and turned it into a tool. But you, Elias Hart, you heard my secret song as a secret, not a performance. That means you might be the first person in years who can carry the truth out without twisting it. Elias shook his head slightly, tears threatening. I am only one man. The queen's eyes sharpened, and when she spoke, her voice filled the chamber. Like a vow, one man is how every rebellion begins. One listener is how every lie dies. You will go through that door. You will leave the palace tunnels. You will reach the outer gardens and the river beyond, and you will find the one person who still remembers what my mother promised your people. Elias swallowed. Your mother. The queen nodded. The queen before me. She signed a treaty with the human coast states, a treaty of sanctuary. She promised that no crown would ever use listening to break the mind of another. Then she died, and her court buried the treaty under ceremony and called it irrelevant. But treaties are not dead if someone remembers the words. Elias's voice was small. Who do I find? The queen's reflection leaned closer, eyes intense. A gardener, she said. An old man with hands stained green. He keeps the river lily alive. In winter, his name is Corrine. He was my mother's friend. He hates this palace the way a wounded animal hates its trap. He will help you if you say one phrase. Elias waited. The queen's lips trembled as if the phrase hurt to say. Tell him. She whispered, the song is not mine. It is borrowed, and I want it back. Elias repeated it, carefully. The song is not mine. "It is borrowed, and I want it back." The queen's eyes glistened, and for a moment Elias saw not a ruler, but a young woman trapped in marble expectations. "Thank you," she said. "Now go, before the palace closes the water path and you lose me." Elias looked at the shimmering door, fear twisting in him. "If I leave, will I ever see you again?" The queen's reflection held his gaze. "If you succeed," she said softly, "you will not need to see me in secret. You will see me in daylight, and the palace will have to listen to the truth for once." A distant sound rumbled through stone, like a lock turning somewhere deep. The water rippled, and the queen's reflection flickered. "Go," she said, louder now. "Go now." Elias stood, hands shaking. He stepped toward the shimmering outline and felt the air change. Cold turned to warmth, darkness to dim green. The scent of stone shifted to the scent of wet soil and crushed leaves. He stumbled out into a narrow garden. Passage hidden between two high hedges. Above him, the palace walls rose like cliffs, but here the air was alive. Birds called from somewhere unseen, and distant water sang. Elias ran, not blindly, but guided by sound. He listened for the river, for the lily, for footsteps that did not belong. Behind him, the palace did not shout. It did not ring alarms. It simply listened, and that was worse. He moved through archways and shadowed courtyards, keeping to hedges, slipping behind statues. Once, a pair of guards passed close enough that he heard their breathing. He held still until their boots faded away. His heart pounded so hard he thought the stones might hear it. When he finally reached the river edge, the water was bright and fast, cutting through the garden like a living blade. Tall grasses bowed in the breeze, and near the bank, under the shelter of a willow, white lily floated stubbornly despite the cold season. A man crouched beside them, hands in the water, moving gently. His hair was gray, his back bent, but his motions were precise, tender. He looked like someone who had spent a lifetime caring for fragile things in a cruel place. Elias approached slowly, trying not to sound threatening. The old man did not look up at first. He said, without turning, "If you are a guard, you will have to kill me here. I will not go back inside." Elias's throat tightened. "I am not a guard," he said. "My name is Elias Hart. I came from the human coast states as a translator, and I am being hunted because I heard her." The old man's hands stopped. He looked up sharply, eyes bright and dangerous. He stared at Elias as if measuring whether he was a trap. Then he spoke, voice low, heard who Elias swallowed, the queen. Her secret song. Through the wall, the old man's jaw tightened, a flash of pain crossing his face. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "She still sings." Elias stepped closer, voice shaking. "She told me to find you. She said your name is Corin." The old man's eyes narrowed further. "Names are cheap," he said. "What did she send you with?" Elias forced the words out exactly. "The song is not mine. It is borrowed, and I want it back." Corinne's face changed. Something ancient and fierce rose in his expression, like a man remembering who he was before he learned fear. He stood slowly, water dripping from his hands. He stared at Elias with a mix of anger and sorrow. Then he said, "They heard you, didn't they?" Elias nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Yes, they are going to erase me." Corin exhaled a harsh laugh that held no humor. "Of course they are, because the palace cannot tolerate an uncontrolled listener." He looked over Elias's shoulder toward the towering walls, eyes dark. "They built that queen into a weapon. They took a girl who loved songs and turned her into a blade. And now a human heard the girl, not the blade, that threatens everything." Elias's voice cracked. "How do I help her?" Corinne stepped closer until Elias could smell wet earth on him. "You cannot help her with courage alone," he said. "You help her with proof. The court will deny, twist, pretend. They will say she sings by choice, that she is honored, that she is grateful. They will dress chains in silk and call it tradition. The only thing that scares them is a truth they cannot bury." Elias wiped at his eyes, trying to steady. "What truth?" Corin's gaze hardened. "The treaty," he said. The sanctuary treaty her mother signed with your people. The one that forbids listening to be used as coercion. The one that declares the queen's voice belongs to herself, not the court. They hid it, but they did not destroy it, because destroying it would mean admitting it matters. Elias felt hope flare, sharp and fragile. Where is it? Corinne pointed toward the palace. Toward a lower tower near the river where stone met shadow. The archive vault, he said. They keep old treaties there like bones in a shrine. Guarded, sealed, watched. If you bring that treaty into open court, if you speak its words aloud where every delegate hears, the palace cannot pretend it never existed, and if the queen hears it, she can claim it. Because her listening is bound into stone, yes, but a vow spoken in public is stronger than stone. Elias's hands trembled. They will kill me before I reach. Corinne's face softened slightly. Then we do not reach it as a man. He said we reach it as a sound. Elias stared, confused. A sound. Corinne crouched and pulled a small reed flute from inside his coat. Simple, worn. He held it up, eyes intense. This river carries more than water, he said. It carries the palace's old channels, the ones built before the court learned cruelty. There is a way to send a melody through the pipes beneath the floors, a melody that makes certain locks respond, because long ago the palace was designed to open for songs, not for threats. Elias's breath caught. You can open the vault with music. Corinne nodded. Not any music, her mother's melody, the one she used to call her daughter back from hiding. The melody the current queen still knows, because she still sings it when she thinks she is alone. You heard her, Elias. You heard the secret song. That means you can catch the correct notes when the palace tries to twist them. Elias felt terror and responsibility crash together. I do not know if I can do that. Corinne stepped in close, voice low and urgent. You can, he said, because you already did. You heard the hidden voice beneath her line. You heard the palace singing with her. That means your ears are not ordinary here. Maybe your people built something into your language. Maybe your heart is simply stubborn. Either way, you can hear what others refuse to. A distant horn sounded once from within the palace grounds. Corinne's eyes sharpened. They are tightening the net, he said. We move now. They went along the river path, hidden by willow and tall grass. Corinne moved faster than his age suggested, like a man powered by anger. Elias followed, listening. He heard guards calling softly to each other across courtyards. He heard the palace breathing through vents like a beast searching for scent. At a low stone culvert, where water disappeared under a wall, Corinne stopped. He knelt, pressed his ear to the stone, and nodded. The old channels are awake, he whispered. He looked at Elias. You will have one chance. If you play the wrong note, the palace will know. If you play the right note, the vault will open long enough for you to take the treaty. Then you run straight to the grand hall. You speak the words before they can stop you. Elias's mouth went dry. Speak the words. Corinne's gaze burned. Yes, because the queen will hear, and once she hears, she can take the vow into her bones. And the court cannot unhear it. Corinne lifted the reed flute. He played a first note, low and soft. The stone beneath Elias's hand vibrated faintly. He played a second note, and water shivered as if the river itself recognized it. Then he stopped. He looked at Elias. Finish it, he said. The last line is hers. Elias closed his eyes, he remembered. The queen's voice, the way it trembled with restraint. He remembered the hidden melody beneath it, the palace's cold counter-song. He searched in his mind for the line that felt like her mother calling, not the court commanding. His hands shook as he took the flute. He played. The first note wavered. He steadied it. The second note rose, clear. The third note fell into a soft, minor turn that made his chest ache. Then the final note. The one that felt like a hand reaching through stone to touch a child's hair. The culvert shuddered. A deep click echoed from somewhere within the wall. Then another, like locks answering. The air changed, and a seam appeared in the stone beside them, opening into a narrow passage. Corinne grabbed Elias's sleeve, eyes fierce. Go, he said, now. Elias slipped into the passage, darkness swallowing him. The stone corridor inside was tight, damp, and humming with faint music. He ran. Guided by instinct and the soft glow of distant ruins, he heard guards above, their boots thudding. He heard them pause, confused. He heard one say, "Did you hear that?" Elias did not stop. He burst into a small chamber lined with shelves, old parchment. Sealed in glass boxes, the archive vault, a shrine of forgotten promises. In the center was a pedestal with a single scroll, heavier than the rest, wrapped in silver thread. Elias approached it like someone approaching the sleeping predator. His hands hovered, then touched. The scroll was warm, not physically, but in a way that felt like a heartbeat. As he lifted it, runes flared along the walls. White and furious, the palace had noticed. A voice thundered through the passage behind him. "Stop!" Elias spun. A guard stood at the entrance, armored, face hidden, weapon raised. Two more figures behind, robed listeners with pale eyes that looked like they had never cried. Elias clutched the scroll to his chest. He did not think. He ran. Past the shelves, shoved open a side door, sprinted down a corridor that sloped upward toward light. Shouts followed, boots pounding. Elias's lungs burned, his vision blurred. He burst into the outer hall near the grand court. Servants gasped, nobles turned, and as Elias ran, the palace itself seemed to whisper, trying to twist sound into command, trying to make his muscles fail. He reached the doors of the grand hall and slammed into them. They were heavy, but they opened under the force of desperation. Inside, the court was assembled, hundreds of voices, 1,000 eyes, and at the far end, on a raised dais, the queen sat like a statue made of night and moonlight. Her crown gleamed, her face composed, her hands folded. Only her eyes moved, and when they found Elias, something shattered in them and lit up at the same time. Guards surged after him, shouting orders, but Elias stepped into the center of the hall and lifted the scroll high. His voice broke through the roar, clear and raw. "Listen," the words struck the air like a bell. For a second, the hall quieted, not because they respected him, because the queen's gaze sharpened, and when the listener queen focused, everyone felt it. Elias swallowed hard, then spoke, forcing each phrase out with breath and control. "This is the sanctuary treaty signed by the former queen. It forbids the use of listening as coercion. It declares the queen's voice belongs to herself. It declares that no court may bind her song into stone. And it declares that any vow spoken in public becomes law, not rumor." A listener-robed figure hissed. "Stepping forward lies forgery." Elias shook his head, tears rising. "You can say whatever you want, but you cannot stop her from hearing the truth now." The queen stood, slowly. The room fell into absolute silence. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner. "Read it," she said. "Read the words aloud." Elias looked at the guards, at their weapons, at the faces that wanted him erased. He looked back at the queen and saw not a crown, but a person pleading without begging. He unwrapped the silver thread with shaking hands, opened the scroll, and began to read. As he read, the air changed. The palace hummed, angry, resisting. But the queen's eyes widened, and Elias saw it happen. He saw the vow land inside her, settle, take root. He saw the hidden chains in her posture loosen by a fraction. He saw her inhale as if for the first time in years. She was breathing her own air. The court tried to interrupt, voices rising. But the queen lifted one hand, and the hall quieted again, not by force, but by fear of what she might hear if they kept speaking. When Elias finished, he lowered the scroll. Shaking for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the queen stepped forward from the dais. Leaving the shadow of her throne, she walked down the steps into the open floor where no queen had walked in public for generations. She stopped in front of Elias, close enough that he could see the faint tremble in her hands. Her voice came out clear, and in it Elias heard the same secret softness as the night song. "I claim my voice," she said. "I claim my song. I claim the Vow my mother spoke, and I claim the right to choose who hears me and why. The listeners moved as if to seize her. The queen turned her head slightly, and for the first time her gaze looked like a blade. You will not touch me, she said, because I heard you. I heard what you planned in the tunnels. I heard the word erase spoken with delight, and now the palace has heard it too. A ripple ran through the stone underfoot, like the palace itself shifting allegiance, as if the old channels remembered the melody and chose the vow over the cruelty. The queen looked back at Elias, eyes wet now, fully human in their emotion despite her pale blue skin. You heard my secret song through the wall, she whispered, and I heard you listening. I thought you were danger, but you were a door. Elias's voice broke. I did not do this to be brave, he said. I did it because your voice sounded lonely, and nobody should be punished for being lonely. The queen's lips trembled, then she did something no one expected. She reached out and placed her hand over his. On the scroll, a simple touch, a public touch, a declaration that he existed, that he mattered, that he would not be erased. She turned to the court, voice rising with controlled fire. This human will be protected under sanctuary, she said. Any attempt to harm him is an attempt to break the vow, and any who break the vow will be named, heard, and removed. Guards hesitated. Nobles exchanged frightened looks. The listeners stood very still, realizing that a queen who owned her voice was the most dangerous thing in the palace. The queen looked up toward the high ceiling, as if addressing the castle itself, and she began to sing, not the secret song, not the chain song, a new song, steady and bright, a song that carried her mother's melody, but belonged fully to her. As she sang, the white runes drifted through the air again. But this time they did not accuse, they glowed like witnesses, like lanterns, like truth finally allowed to exist. Elias stood beside her, tears on his face, listening openly, and for the first time, the palace did not punish the listener, it listened too, and it learned. When the queen's final note ended, it ended not as a cut thread, but as a released breath. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then somewhere in the balconies, a single person began to clap. Softly, uncertainly, another joined, then another, until the sound became a wave, not of celebration, but of surrender to what could no longer be hidden. The queen leaned toward Elias and spoke so only he could hear. You carried my song outside the wall, she whispered. Now I will carry it into daylight. And if you ever hear me sing in secret again, it will be because I choose you as my friend, not because I am trapped. Elias nodded, unable to speak. He had come to translate words, but he had ended up translating loneliness into courage, and courage into a vow the world could not ignore. Outside, beyond the windows, the river kept moving, bright and relentless, and in its sound, Elias swore he could hear the beginning of the next song already forming.